What's up, world? This is Raul with LiveLOUD coming at you guys again with another episode of Say It Loud, bridging business and impact. What I really love about this is that I really get to tie in all the elements of impact all into one. So a lot of people might associate it to be different things where I could follow my career path and build a business or work for a job, or I could be in the world of impact and be in the world of service. And I love that I've been able to cultivate relationships around the world with people who are doing both, who are bridging impact into their business and who are building their business mindfully, consciously into the forms of creating impact around the world. So again, guys, Say It Loud is a space where we get to hear powerful stories from people all around the world who are creating these impacts through their services, through their craft, through their business. And we don't just get to hear what they've created, but we get to hear where it came from. What is their story that led them to this point? Was it hardship? Was it triumph? What were the human elements that really tied into how they experienced their life and how they transformed it into creating what they're doing now and creating success through it? So today, my guest, Sergio, is going to be talking about his platform, about how he creates impact, and all in all, just creating a business that wins while he's consciously serving other people. So Sergio, thank you so much for jumping on the call with me today, man.
Of course. Thank you for having me, Raul. This is great.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So why don't you go ahead and tell people exactly what you're up to in the world?
Sure. So my name is Sergio Marrero. I am managing partner at Rebel One, and we are an investor training network, but also we also invest in impact startups, and we focus on startups aligned with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So our goals focus on zero disease, zero pollution, zero poverty, and zero inequality.
That's amazing, man. So how is it that you work with your clients? What is a day in the life of, who's your target demographic and how does that show up?
Great question. So for us, we do, again, investor training. So people that are interested in becoming angel investors, or they want to break into venture capital, and they're really focused on early stage startups, or even starting to at the seed and Series A level. Sometimes the pre-seed, and we talk about how to assess them. So we go through a program, and one of the challenges that exists is when people want to get into investing, they go, okay, I'm just going to start doing it and put money out there. And there's no program in a systematic way that there is to become a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant, right? So what we're doing is creating a program that step by step, that if you go through all the pieces, you would have gone through the major elements of identifying ventures, conducting due diligence, and at the end, we're really not only creating training, but a community that's excited about not only investing to build wealth, but also putting their, like I say, voting with your dollar and investing as impact. So putting money into ventures that are the externality of what they're creating is good. That helps you do both, make money, but also make an impact.
Yeah, I mean, that's really powerful. And why is it that you tie it into impact? Because, investment and having an ROI and, just being strategic with that kind of stuff. And the common, I guess the stigma of impact is that it's not a sustainable industry, or it's scarce, in as far as like finances. So what is it that made you bridge or wanting to work necessarily with the SDGs, with this type of practice?
That's right. So I would say when I originally started, we didn't define it in terms of the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals by the United Nations. But right now, since the United Nations has done a great job of creating this set of goals that's tied to the specific goals of countries, right? And to align to them, really is more efficient for making an impact. So that's why we align to those specifically. And how I, really fell into it, because I say for-profit impact, and I make that clear because there are many ways to make an impact. You can work at a nonprofit, run a nonprofit. We need those, all these types of organizations that do good work. I just particularly focus on for-profit impact organizations, and part of it is my bias that that I believe that the world, that I would like to see a world where the dominant narrative, that the average company has elements of impact in it. And we don't ask whether a company on the S&P 500, we're like, is that a profitable, like, is that company's goal to make a profit? Like, we don't ask because of course it is. That's why that's the purpose of the entity. Mm-hmm. And I would like it to be the same for impact startups. And and I think our generation is demanding that in the products they purchase. That's part of how you vote with your dollar as well. Mm-hmm. It's enabling us to, the younger generation says, I want to put money in, but I also want to believe in the mission and vision of the entity that I'm putting money into. And you can do both. It is hard as an entrepreneur. It is more difficult because you have to focus on more than one thing. And we train founders as well. We just launched our founders training, where we're actually training. We're offering free training for those that have lost their job due to COVID. And I talked extensively about the challenges of, it's hard enough to start a business, let alone a business that also measures impact as well. Yeah. But it's something, it's a skill, and I think we're capable of that. And people are up to the challenge. Yeah, definitely, man. You're preaching to the choir, man. I have been, for a while, I think I was caught up on this thing. Is it business or impact? Is it business or impact? And we didn't get too much into my story when we chatted, but traveling the world and going to work with developing communities and organizations that are creating impact, I walked away from a scaling business. I walked away from a business that was growing and that was coming out strong, actually. Like, I was pulling out clientele as soon as I launched my business, and I started focusing on brand development, for conscious brands, for people that stand for impact, and things started going really well. But I thought there might be something else out there, so I left to go create that impact. But for me, there was a divide, and in my recent history, I've been bridging that, which I really love our conversation, because impact does get to be lucrative. Impact gets to be profitable. If it's not profitable, it's not sustainable. So I'm all for the nonprofits. I work with such amazing nonprofits, but my purpose on being in this industry, on the branding, marketing, consulting type of side, is because I want to make those conscious, impactful platforms, companies, services, individuals thrive in their stand, because if there's going to be an exchange of currency anywhere, if there's going to be exchange of dollar, then let's distribute it towards those that are consciously trying to contribute to the whole and not just trying to take away from it. So I really love that you create, you're working, especially on this side of it, like there's this side of it that are people that are on the ground, on the field and doing this type of work, which, they need the support, and it's great. And I love that your platform is on this side of it, talking about the investors and training them and supporting them to win with their intention while they're contributing and funneling toward the places of impact. Yeah, and I describe it as a spectrum so I'll give you an example of, we talk about the different types of investing. There's philanthropic, like this is all impact, right? There's philanthropic on one side. In the middle, we call it concessionary, where you're conceding some profits. You're willing to take a lower return on investment because it's making a certain impact. And then on the other side is, I'm making a fiscally sound investment. Like, that's the base criteria. It needs to be one of the best investments that I'm making, but it also has to have an impact layer to it. And that's where we live. And you need people focused on all areas of the spectrum. It's realistic, but that's how we describe that. And then also, gets into a further conversation that I think people right away that are biased toward one or the other, and I focus on that. Doesn't mean I don't think the other areas are important or people need to not focus on it.
So, question, man. So, where did this all brew from? Say It Loud is kind of the story of how we arrived here. How is it that you got into this world of finances, investments, impact? Working or like you said at first, it wasn't necessarily targeted towards the SDGs or the Sustainable Development Goals, and it transformed into that. What has been that journey that you experienced yourself? Okay, this is where I'm aligned. This is what I'm supposed to do. What was that for you?
That's a great question. I would have never thought I would have been on the investor side. That was just not something I was excited about, and not at the time, and not something that I saw myself making an impact in that way. So how did it begin? I would say I've always been, I say now I'm founder first. Even though we're investing, we're innovating on the model of investing and creating opportunities for people to invest together, and I think that is the key there. But always from DJing when I was younger to weddings, to doing graphic design and video editing, and always tinkering, so it wasn't a surprise when I ended up in the entrepreneurship space. I was studying at Harvard Business School and the Kennedy School of Government, and I was focused on the reason the government aspect came in. I was focused on the intersection of business and government, making businesses and also making an impact. Really driven from my access to education. I was first in my family to go to a 4-year college, and then go to grad school, let alone Harvard. And the access was incredible, life-changing for me. And I said, how do you give people more of this access? So working on access to education, and built a startup that ended up pitching at, we were finalists at South by Southwest. I would say the first startup endeavor, I actually took leave from my grad program, got money, and we built a product. We went all the way down to Startup Chile. We were building a business out of there in a very short period of time. We launched a product. The product didn't get the traction we had anticipated. We ran out of funds, and we didn't agree on where we were going next. I was so stressed out, my hair was falling out. It was crazy. It was like wild. Really, it was such I would say a spectacular failure. I laugh about it now, but it was there that I said, okay, am I cut out for this? Like, what did I not do? Right? What's there was very little guidance. There's all these disparate programs, but there wasn't anything cohesive. So I just ended up really reflecting, detoxing for about 2 months, and then said, I'm gonna go get the skills that I feel I'm missing. I went to work at an innovation and design firm to take what I had learned in the field and apply it to larger businesses. I worked at a venture capital firm to understand the finance in the background. And then the third piece that I did was I trained founders. I took what I had learned. I said there are cheap and inexpensive ways to learn, and just started doing that on the side. Ended up doing it at the Harvard Innovation Lab, Startup Chile. I've done sessions at Parallel 18 in Puerto Rico, and a number of incubators and accelerators, and then eventually even studied venture studios, which are like I call them startup factories as startup studios. And I did my thesis on that in grad school. So I dived deep into learning as much as I could before kind of taking it again. And of course I was like, all right, let's do it again. So I started my next startup. We were moving forward. That's the one that went to South by Southwest, got initial funding, and had an amazing co-founder. And we had our team overseas in Puerto Rico, and then Hurricane Maria hit the island, and put us in a tough spot where we didn't have that much money left. And then also people weren't about like our team wasn't worried about coding. Neither was I. I was worried about their safety. There was lack of running water, electricity, and easy access to food, and they're in survival mode. And it was through that we ended up shutting that down and getting people jobs, and everyone landed safely. So that was the most important thing. But really humbling that and telling that you cannot really determine, you could be as audacious as possible, but you need the resources and determine where you're going. So the next step, I took a step back and I ended up training founders again. So that was, it was like another restart and saying, okay, like, where do I go from here? And then I was recruited to join two gentlemen that were starting a fund They were raising $100 million fund out in San Francisco, and they wanted me to, like run the operations of the program. I did that, led the team of 25 there. And it ended up, I took my founder training, flipped it on its head, and I trained investors. And I just never knew that the ability to slice into startups and understand what needs to happen would be useful from the investing side. But then things shifted to investing because I was approached by many aspiring investors, many of them underrepresented, women, Black, Latino, that were trying to get into the industry, and said, I cannot afford, program is designed to be in person, $20,000 is pretty expensive. I can't afford to do this. Like, how do I still gain access to this? And then what turned into deal reviews on the weekends with underrepresented founders eventually laid the groundwork for Rebel One. So the organization we run now, where we have a robust training program, 10 weeks, and it's built to be part-time, to work around your schedule. And we have everything from an online database of over almost 200 courses videos at this point that are based on the research of talking to over 50 Silicon Valley VCs and beyond. We do partners meetings, we cover some Harvard Business School cases, and also we when there's not a global pandemic, we do have meetups. We've had them in LA, San Francisco, Chicago, and New York. So really building a tight community focused on impact and excited about investing to build wealth, and then also accelerating founders that are making a difference in the world. So.
Yeah, that's brilliant, man. And I really acknowledge you for getting back on the horse, to be there in Chile and experiencing having your hair fall out. I know exactly what you mean. But to be under that type of stress and failure, right? That level of failure or whatever that you were experiencing. And then to be able to come back, revamp, reground, educate yourself, restructure, and get back into the game and teach people in the process, and to lead people that have been down or that are going down this route, to be mindful and strategic on possible, holes in the road where we might not have been clear about, we might not have known about, but it takes in your experience. And I also hear the level of experience that you're walking into is working with the investor science, being that this side well, the process of it, the structure, you've been through that stuff of developing and structuring out that stuff. So I would imagine that that's creating another level of safety and security for the investors to know that, well, he's been there, he's actually knows some of those roads and what it takes to actually be a sustainable and a good investment on that side. I want to take a step backwards before all this stuff. Where did this impact desire come from? Where did that brew from? Even just the idea of contribution or impact.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say rooted in my family. The desire for entrepreneurship, and then there's the desire for impact, and those are two different things. So I know you didn't ask about the entrepreneurship, but covering that, I grew up in a household of creatives. My dad is a musician. He used to play with Ruben Blades, and he, my sister's a graphic designer. The other one was a dancer, and so very creative. And then I was the more technical one. I was the engineer. I went for engineering and business, but was always surrounded by creatives, and that became my art became. I see it as helping organizations grow, creating initiatives from zero, and that's what I wanted to be best at. And not to say that I think it's a continuous craft to get better, but where the impact element came from, and it's definitely a bias, is seeing some of my family grow up. I have family that grew up in, Spanish Harlem, in the projects, low income housing. And to me, it was just normal. It was just, this is just reality. When I went to college, that was the accomplishment, right? To get in and to go and to it was one of the proudest moments, and then you talk to people there, and college is almost assumed. And it was that paradigm shift mentally that I said, how come this is not more accessible to more people? How come in certain communities it isn't assumed that you continuously learn in this way, at least formally? And I would say I deviated away from that just because of the rigor of school and the pressure of that. And I was working at Deloitte in the consulting practice and mentoring a high school student on through a program called the Deloitte Education Collaborative. And I'm supposed to help him apply to college. This was like one of the pivot moments. And I think the third time we met, he said, my girlfriend's pregnant. And I'm sitting there like looking at him, and I'm supposed to like help him, through something that I have no experience doing. And I have, I do, come from a community of more privilege, right? And just understanding like how do I help him, and then going through that experience of really coaching and mentoring and learning from him and him learning from me. I said I want to apply my professional skills in a way that truly makes an impact beyond my time. And how do I do that? And that is something I noodle on continuously. I think that's I think that, and it's fine to do this, but for people that have made it to areas of privilege, like I'm not gonna say I haven't. I went to Harvard Business School, I went to the Kennedy School of Government, I've worked at Fortune 500 companies, and I think to myself, like, how do I put this to work to make things better? Like what? And not everyone does that. They said, like I can get a good job now, I can afford a certain life, and you have to balance that. But I've decided to dedicate, my life in that way, and myself to make an impact in that way. And that's kind of where it stemmed from is, really the family aspect. Family is always giving in different ways. And then those moments, that made me see how much, I have and that we can really make an impact in other people's lives. So.
That's brilliant, man. That's exactly where it's at, man. I love that you were able to reflect on family. This I experienced also a lot of people that have been to, well, I did it, so they should be able to do it, and so there's no empathy, there's no not much compassion. There might be some, but it's like no excuses. Which cool, we could argue that, but to know that there's something like what is up with this system? How do we redefine it? How do I contribute my expertise, my learning, win at the same time, and be able to be conscious about the impact that I create, and having that. I experienced something somewhat, very different, but similar in the sense where, I went to a university, like I pushed for industrial design, and I had to work really hard at it, man, because it didn't come after high school. I took care of my father. 3 times he had cancer. I took care of him. Walked away from going directly into school, coming back to it, doing this stuff, going back into the world, building up my business and working in the design industry. I feel like I took a step back from the race, and I was like, who's made this agenda? Where did this come from? What about everyone else? What about the people that mean well, that stand for impact, that stand for good? And I'm even thinking about my own mom, who's like, has a heart of gold. She'll feed the world first, and where are the things that are designed to support them? So, and at the same time, how do we win in this society? How do we win in this cosmopolitan structure and be able to be successful and thrive? So, my goal or my mission just really easily aligned to, okay, cool, this makes sense, where I could take care of myself. I could win successfully in my business and my career, while simultaneously bridge the gap towards the opportunities that could support the good in the world. And I love that you found your version of doing that. I'm sure you're far from done. I'm sure it's going to reinvent and transform and create new levels of it. And I love that every time I talk to you, you're completely swamped and busy, taking this stuff on, man, it's always a good sign, man, because you're a warrior for good in the world, regardless of what type of way, man. Like the fact that there's consciousness and good out there, that's really what LiveLOUD's all about. That's what Say It Loud's about. And I appreciate you, man. Thank you for telling your story, man. I appreciate that.
No, of course. And I like that term you use. You talk about warrior for good, and it has this undertone of relentlessness. And I think that is that audacity and that continuity. I think I have to remind myself, as others, that self-care is probably the best thing you can do for others. Is like you need to be you need to be centered in yourself. But I tell people there are different types of impact. You can lead a nonprofit, start a nonprofit, and serve a specific community. But there are different flavors of impact. You could do something very robust for a small set of people. So I give an example of like Harlem Capital. They do an all-inclusive model for a very a smaller community. Or you could do something simple for like Kiva example that does microloans. They do microloans, like very specific. I give you a small amount of money for a lot of people. It depends on how you want to make an impact, but also as it relates to investing. And I'll tie it to that is I like to tell people that's where you may find some of the best investments. And they're like, what do you mean? I said, you got to look at the delta of the person. So where did they come from and where are they now? And they're probably going to continuously, they're yes, ups and downs, but they're going to keep going, right? Do they have this trajectory? I'll talk about one, Emmanuel, company's Brain High. He grew up in Puerto Rico on the other side of the island, and then ended up going to an incubator and then going to Y Combinator, which is like one of the top incubators in the world. Like he's like raised money, growing his business, and you see the delta, the difference between like where he was and where he is now, and you're just and then he's in his not even 30 yet, and you're saying that's the type of breakout. That's what you're betting on. That's why I say it's like, it not only is good to economically empower communities by investing in them and enabling them to build businesses outside of areas, outside of the core areas that get investment, but also it just makes sense. If they're started making money now and the economics, you're investing in them and their long-term success. So two of the founders that we're backing now, one of them, he didn't graduate from college, ended up building was a trucker, ended up building a trucking business called Fleeting, and then started a multi-billion-dollar company. They're doing, they just crossed $1 million in revenue, started about a year ago, give or take. Like that's what I'm saying there. It's unbelievable. Like you're like, where am I going to bet? I'm going to bet over there. Right. And then he may need to, it's like the support and skills to get to another level. I could keep going, but thanks, Raul, for having me. No, it was great.
Yeah, no, that was solid, man. And I completely, man, pay attention to the delta. Where did it come from? How far has it created? What innovative thinking did they have to take despite adversities or any type of circumstances that they might be endured, that they might have been born into? And what have they created from there to see the trajectory? I could see why you're a really sound place to really be mindful about where you can invest and being able to look at these micro things, but not necessarily just what's occurring, but where it came from, the trajectory and the direction that is going, and still tying in that how this all wraps around impact consciousness, man. That's really solid. So where can people find your work, follow you, ask you questions that they want to work with you, etc.?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thanks for picking that up. So rbl1.com, that Rebel One. You can find our founder training program, our investor program. You can also find me on LinkedIn, Sergio Marrero. So but always check us out at rbl1.com. Happy to accelerate and really build a community of impact founders and investors. So thanks for having me, Raul.
Fantastic, man. Yeah, so everyone listening in, if this rings up your alley, if there's something that you guys been wanting to tap into, get investment, if you know of people who have been interested in getting into this world and want to funnel it towards that impact, funnel it towards that consciousness so that there's a win-win on both sides, on really like a really high possibility and power to be able to go and bridge those two, especially with the knowledgeable people that have been down those roads and also been part of the world of impact. Please tap into Rebel One, check them out. I'm going to be putting the links in the description below. And Sergio, thank you so much again for sharing your story, man. That was powerful, man.
All right. Thank you, Raul. Appreciate it.
So for everyone tuning in, make sure to stay tuned to more Say It Loud episodes where we get to hear about people. Please subscribe, follow, share. This whole thing is about bridging gaps and pulling people closer together through our narrative, through our story, and spreading the good in the world. So it's really important that we get this message out there because there's some organizations that get to be impacted by Sergio, and some investors who are just looking into ways of where to do so, how to do so successfully, and not to sway away from it. Let's create those opportunities and those possibilities now. And we will be coming back with more episodes coming soon. Much love.